and welcome to another episode of Let's Play Front Mission 5, Scars of the War. So we have a lot to do in this episode, I'm afraid. Or rather, maybe that's a good thing. But a lot of it is kind of like housekeeping stuff, I guess you might say. We have a lot of pilot trading to do, and this is the part of the game where we'll be saying goodbye to most of the pilots we've been using thus far. And yeah, I mean, again, as I said, this is kind of a divisive point about this game, that you do get these pilots early in the game and then kind of are encouraged to get rid of them. And in any case, after this dialogue that I'm about to show you here, these pilots don't have any special dialogue anyway. So in the past, we've been able to go to the ready room and see them sort of banter with each other and that kind of thing. But from this point on, except for one line that we are going to see later in the game, these characters have no special dialogue. So very much unlike the characters you would see in Front Mission, well, in all the other Front Mission games with special characteristics and special dialogue, special portraits, etc., etc. These characters are all very generic and interchangeable. But let's see what these characters have to say before we give them the boot. So the first thing you mentioned there is that we've got called up in a big rush, and actually what's going on here is that Feng was on vacation or leave, and he was basically called up in an emergency to participate in a special operation, and we're going to see what that's all about in just a moment. The other thing is Damon saying you two should just, you know, go for it. Well, I think he's obviously referring to Walter and Lynn. It's kind of no secret that they've got some romantic tension going on, and it's like, you know, go for it. Might not feel like you're in a rush, but why not? Yeah, so that is obviously a reference to the cinematic that we just saw at the end of the last mission, which was extremely badass, as I mentioned then. One thing I would say about that cinematic, though, is that if I was directing the scene, what I would have done is, like, you know, at the beginning of the scene, it should have been like Lynn heard that these mobile weapons were there, and like the plan was Fubar, and I would have liked to see her like on the bridge and then like running off the bridge, like saying like hang on or something like that, and then all of a sudden, you know, she's on the deck of the aircraft carrier, the giant rifle, blowing them away. I think that just would have established a little bit better continuity, and like the fact that, you know, Lynn was involved in the scene while you were out doing the mission. But, you know, that's a very minor criticism. I think it was a really cool scene nonetheless. And we're going to see a lot of the soldiers in this mission sort of be like, why are we fighting terrorists? I thought we were in this assault squad. Yeah, so, you know, our job is typically very much more the sort of job that we were doing in the previous mission. Go into some heavily defended base and tear shit up. But instead, we are being deployed to a mission to take out some terrorists. And yes, we're going to the Caspian Sea. So, I mean, that's not actually what Lynn said there in that cinematic. She said, mo motori nai tokoro ni iru. So, I'm in a place from which I cannot return. As in, I have changed, and I can't return to what I was before. And then I think Ed is sort of making, you know, a rather obvious reference to puberty right here, or something like that. Or, you know, maybe Walter took her virginity, or something like that. Obviously that didn't happen, but Edward's just screwing with him, as he usually does. Yeah, if we go over here, you can see all these guys standing at attention. And they just sort of blather on about, hire me, put me in the party, and it kind of continues this jokey tone that we had with Ed in the previous base section, where he's like, oh, these are just the losers that you can fire if you like. So they're all kind of desperate to not be fired, I guess is kind of the joke there. And they basically never have anything interesting to say. Just ignore them. Okay, so we got that out of the way. Let us go to control section and we'll watch this briefing. And then we will do the stuff we need to do in this area here. I just want to check the operations room to make sure that there's nothing missing. Right. So, actually there's nothing we're missing. There's a lot of sort of like military jargon and like war nerd kind of stuff going on in this base section, but I will try to explain the parts that are not explained in the dialogue itself where necessary.
よし、揃ったな。始めるぞ。カスピ海にある掘削陸軍がテロヤどもに占拠されている状況は知っているな。長期化する現状に周辺諸国からの要請で国連軍が組織されることになった。占拠されているリグは全部で5つ。これを各国の部隊が一斉強襲する。我々の取り分は1つ。バーゲストと協力して一気にやる。
バーゲスト？文献隊と？
そもそもテロ事件は向こうの担当だ。ヘクター・レイノルズ。文献隊を指揮する切れ者だ。だが切れすぎてな。その活躍を良しとしない連中もいる。
上の派閥争いに巻き込まれるのは嫌ですよ。
まあそう言うな。これも仕事だ。コマンドは私が担当する。レッドリーダーはフェン。コリンズがセカンドだ。
少佐、失敗して海面降下しても怒らないでくださいよ。
我が部隊にそんな間抜けは存在しない。よってそれは敵だ。救援の必要はない。どうせすぐに沈む。
Okay, right. So this is the first time in the game that we are introduced to the Barghest unit. And the name Barghest actually refers to a mythical two-headed black dog, which you may remember was mentioned previously in reference to Walter and Lynn's childhood. They had this drawing, or this picture book, with a black dog, weird looking black dog on it. I think that's what Ed said. back at perhaps it was in Freedom City or Fort Bonus, one of the two. Anyhow, I said at the time that that was a reference to Cerberus, but actually, no, it's a reference to Bargast. That was a mistake on my part. So, you know, the involvement of these characters with Bargast is foreshadowed by their childhood. It's a little sort of convenient bit of narrative organization there. And we're going to learn a lot more about Bargast as this game goes on. Okay, so first things first, let's take care of this recruiting stuff. Then we will deal with the rest of the dialogue. So, the reason I am going to go and recruit in this particular order is so that I can get all of the bonuses, RP bonuses that are available in the game from recruiting characters, and also so that I can keep one member of our original squad in the party up until the point when they will have their final dialogue in the game. Your final unique dialogue. So just so we can see that. And then of course, we will be recruiting a certain somebody in this mission as well, which I have been looking forward to. Okay, so the first thing we got to do is recruit Jeff Zone. And we go ahead and recruit him, and we swap out Robert. Goodbye, Robert. And I think he's referring to his physical frame, not sponsor frame. Okay, and then the next character we need is Raymond. It's right here. Scout him, and we will replace Jamie with him. Bye, Jamie. Never will see him again. Then we go back to the ready room, and then we make up a party, and that party will be, we need Gordon, Tony, Jeff, and Raymond. So Gordon, Tony, Jeff, Raymond. And Ed's dialogue there, like, make this drop or you're fired. I think he's just mimicking Lynn, as he often does. Alright, so we got the specialist group bonus there. And explore the depths means, you know, when she drops it, lets him sink to the bottom of the sea and drown to death, as she said she would in the briefing. Okay, back out. Now we need to find Ralph. This room. Ralph, here you are, Ralph. Okay, we recruit this character. We trade out Tony for this guy. Then we go grab Watt. And Watt is in the gym, yes. And we'll swap out Jim. Goodbye, Jim. Done a good job for us, but it's time to go now. This is actually a unique recruit dialogue here. And this is an important character to have in order to recruit some other characters later in the game. And then we need to grab Robin. Just make sure he's not here. There he is, Robin. Okay, then we grab Robin. And we swap out Christine. Oh, Christine. No longer will you double punch for us. Then we go back to the briefing room, or the ready room, and make up another team. Okay, this team is Jeff, Ralph, Robin, Watt. So we now have access to Battle Simulator 20, which does also, if you can clear it, give you access to a special part. Right, so basically those guys are all sort of badass veterans. Yeah, I mean, there's not too much more to say about that. They're all pretty badass, and you get a bonus for that. Okay, so now we go to the simulator room. And who do we find here? Oh, it's a certain Captain Trobel. Now, this is actually after Front Mission 4. So Front Mission 4 took place in between the time that we last saw Daryl and the time that we're meeting him now. So now we can purchase scintilla parts from the shop. We don't actually get a scintilla, but we can buy scintilla parts, which may or may not be better, depends on how you feel about it. And it's weird he says that because we don't actually get the parts, we have to buy them still. Somehow you remind me of this great guy I met years ago. Well, I believe that is a reference. I'm gonna have to check with my friend, the project leader, about this. I believe he is referring to Kevin, the protagonist of the USN campaign in Front Mission 1. Kevin Greenfield, who I mentioned in the plot video about the B device. Because I don't think that Daryl meets Glenn in Front Mission 1. And that's really my best guess I can think of there. But I'll ask my friend about that and get some confirmation about who he's referring to. Because there are no, like, quote-unquote great guys that you meet in Front Mission 4 that I can think of that he would be referring to. But maybe something is slipping my mind here. And you have to choose this option. Of course we do. So then we recruit Daryl and we trade out Robin. Robin, I hardly knew ya. Okay, we've got Daryl. So this is actually the only game in the Front Mission series where you can have two protagonists in your team simultaneously. It's not the only game where protagonists show up in other games, or like protagonists from other games show up in the game. That's certainly not the case, but it is the only one where you can get two of them in your team. So that's pretty cool. Obviously, Daryl is going to be our go-to striker because it's pretty cool. I mean, I said that I preferred the protagonist from Front Mission 2 and maybe Kevin from Front Mission 1, but Daryl's a pretty good character too. Okay, so at this point, we can go ahead and actually do the rest of the mission here, or the rest of the dialogues. So everybody's like, wow, Walter is so awesome. Especially, you know, getting called off leave to come do this crazy mission. Let us go to the briefing room here. Okay. Right, so this area of the Caspian Sea is disputed by multiple countries, and they all want to claim the resources of the Caspian Sea. Zaftra, aka Russia, is one of them, but the EC is also involved, so maybe makes you think a little bit about the current dispute over the Ukraine. Of course, that wasn't going on at the time this game was made, but seems topical enough. And the plot points that come up in this section of the game are sort of tangentially related to Front Mission Alternative, and we'll see a little bit more of that in just a moment. So, again, maybe the portrayal of war is a little bit non-standard in this series. Remember that Walter and Randy really didn't, and Glenn didn't really care very much about the war they were fighting in the Huffman conflict. And now we've got these soldiers here, like, just dissatisfied with this whole anti-terrorism thing. They consider it to just be a whole bunch of theater for the press and like a big kind of cock measuring contest among nations. So yeah, as he says, like, there's this UN operation going on that has special forces from various countries participating, and they all get their own little oil rig to invade, and they also are sending their most elite special forces in to slaughter these poor terrorists, you know, who are trying to take over these oil rigs, basically for sport, you know. So he feels sorry for them. Alright, we're gonna get a little bit of Lynn's backstory here. And I guess some of you may be familiar with SOCOM. I believe it's the Special Operations Command is the name of it. United States Special Operations Command, yes. And one point that you need to know about SOCOM in order to understand the dialogue that happens in this section is why it was created. So there was this operation that happened back in the 1980s, like the early 1980s. It was called Operation Eagle Claw. And it was ordered by President Carter to attempt to end the Iran hostage crisis by rescuing 52 diplomats held captive at the Embassy of the United States, Tehran, on the 24th of April, 1980. And it was a massive failure, and it severely damaged Jimmy Carter's presidency and contributed to Ronald Reagan's victory in the 1980 presidential election. And the fallout of this disaster, which I guess to some extent was caused by poor coordination between the different armed forces, was the creation of SOCOM. And they wanted to create a, you know, unified Special Forces Command. Yeah, a Special Operations Command, I should say, which includes a certain kind of Special Forces Command. And basically, SOCOM is a very high-ranking organization within the U.S. military. And when they say that Barghest is under SOCOM, under the direct command of SOCOM as a special unit, that suggests that they are very, very elite indeed. And probably more elite than the Strike Wyverns, even though they have a very different assignment than the Strike Wyverns, which is to do anti-terrorism operations, whereas you know, the Strike Wyverns are engaged in sort of like heavy assault roles. They're sometimes involved in extra-legal roles, they say. Well, if you know anything about the history of Special Forces, that shouldn't be terribly surprising. Alright, so we learned that Barghest are a bunch of badasses. Now, if Lynn is saying this guy is a man to be feared, you'd better pay attention to what she's saying, because she is kind of fearless. And we learn here, what we learn here is that Lynn is sort of initiated into the world of USN intelligence. She also knows Hector Reynolds, who is the commander of Barghest and a, you know, part of SOCOM. So she's got connections at SOCOM, she's got connections at USN intelligence. So that talk that we heard in the previous section, like the rumors of her possibly coming from some assassination training program or an intelligence training program, is probably not too far off the mark. So she doesn't want to talk about it, but she's got a past with Hector Reynolds. Now, you remember that cutscene we saw, there was only a small number of people in the briefing room, so that's what she's mentioning. She's saying, like, oh, have you been telling, like, this classified information to the rest of the soldiers? So, make sure you don't fall in the water, or Lynn will leave you to die. So Edward's still freaking out about drowning. Alright, let's talk to these three, and then we're going to have a little bit more discussion about Operation Eagle Claw. Okay, and so now this is really getting complicated. So they mentioned Team 6. Well, this is actually a reference to SEAL Team 6. The United States Naval Special Warfare Development Group is a U.S. Navy component of the Joint Special Operations Command. It is often referred to as SEAL Team 6. Okay, so basically, this is a highly elite, highly secretive unit that is commonly called SEAL Team 6, even though its name has often changed. It's a part of the Navy, and it is, I believe it's a part of the Navy, and it is similar to Delta Force, which I'm sure many of you are familiar from the U.S. are familiar with from the U.S. Army, and it is a counterterrorism unit primarily. It does do other things, but that is its main role. So, SEAL Team 6 is under the Joint Special Operations Command. Now, the Joint Special Operations Command, they are a part of SOCOM, okay? And they have control over SEAL Team 6, and presumably they have some kind of relationship to Marine Command. And so, I guess what they're trying to say here is that you have SOCOM sending in Vargas, you have Marine Command sending in Strike Wyverns, and then you have the Joint Special Operations Command under the influence maybe of the U.S. Navy or USN Navy. sending in SEAL Team 6. Like, I'm not a expert at all on the arcane mysteries of the U.S. military bureaucracy, but I guess that's kind of what's going on here. Is you have these 3 different service branches, or I suppose it's not really the right term, but different organizations sending in their pet unit, and Marine Command was feeling left out. It's like, why don't we have an anti-terrorism unit? So they decided to send in the Strike Wyverns so they could get some flashy news that they could use to procure some more funding somewhere down the line. So yeah, so maybe so it seems that SEAL Team 6 is maybe still primarily an infantry unit, and they might be maneuvering to try to get some Vonzers added to their unit so that they could perform operations similar to those done by Bargast, and then get some money, which of course is what this is all about: money and prestige and money. And then the big question comes up, did the Major have something to do with this? So, perhaps Lynn has an agenda in organizing this operation. That's what we're led to believe. And then we also learned that she has some kind of history with Hector Reynolds. So, what she's after, we don't know, but she's up to something. Oh my god. Here we go again. More jargon. So, okay, we're with the 4th Marine Expeditionary Unit. You know, you can look this stuff up on Wikipedia with me. I actually remember very well translating this section of the game and spending a lot of time on Wikipedia, like pouring through different articles, trying to understand the minutiae of the organization of the U.S. military, which, you know, it bears mentioning, is the largest organization in the world, period. Like, it is the single largest organization in the entire world. So the scope of its bureaucracy is just mind-boggling when you really think about it. Anyway, the Marine Expeditionary Units are quick reaction forces deployed and ready for immediate response to any crisis. They're composed of a Marine Infantry Battalion, a tilt rotor squadron, so an aviation combat element, a logistics combat element, and a command element. So you can imagine that that's just been slightly adjusted in front mission time to include Bonzers along with the infantry. Like, basically they join what are called ESGs, or Expeditionary Strike Groups, and I assume that, ESGs are sort of like a larger, they're like a larger group within the U.S. Navy that would basically ferry the Marines to where they need to go. So, you know, I'm not going to get too much into the details of this, but basically this is like a common unit of organization within the U.S. Marines, and it has its own particular characteristics that make it different from the Army, Navy, or Air Force, or of course the Coast Guard. So, you know, as I said, the MEUs are supposed to be rapid reaction forces, so these may be complaining that we're away from base when we should actually be waiting around to deploy to a certain crisis point instead of constantly being sailing around on the Eclipse and engaging in our assault roles. Okay, so now in addition to the Marine Expeditionary Unit, you have the Marine Expeditionary Forces. Now this is a different thing. The Marine Expeditionary Force is the largest type of Marine Air-Ground Task Force. The MEF is the largest building block of the United States Marine Corps combat power. It is larger than a Marine Expeditionary Unit or a Marine Expeditionary Brigade. So each MEF consists of a division as the ground combat element, an aircraft wing as the aviation combat element, and a logistics group as the logistics combat element. So that is the same as an MEU, but it also contains a special operations training group, and, well, I guess it just has a lot more men and material and vehicles and so on. So basically what's going on here is that we have been specially deployed as part of the 4th Marine Expeditionary Unit to this area, when in fact this is like the jurisdiction, you might say, or the area, the turf of the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force. Now if you actually go and look it up, there is, I believe, the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force is actually based in Okinawa, Japan. So I guess what this means is that India and maybe the Middle East would fall under their jurisdiction, as opposed to whatever group that the Strike Wyverns have to be part of in the 4th Marine Expeditionary Unit. So, what is the point of all this babbling on and on and on and on about the U.S. military organization? Well, the point is that, much like our involvement in this anti-terrorism operation being strange, our involvement in this area of the world is also very strange. And again, this points to the involvement of Lynn and whatever scheme she is involved in, whatever scheme she has gotten us into. Okay, and I said, we're going to talk a little bit about Front Mission Alternative. Here is your Front Mission Alternative lore coming up. They have a great anti-terrorist unit with a lot of firepower. I believe that is a Front Mission 4 reference, and I'm not too sure exactly who they're referring to. Maybe they're referring to the Blauer Nibel, but I'd have to look into that to be absolutely certain of what unit they'd be referring to there. It's not really mentioned directly, but actually in the storyline of Front Mission Alternative, it's basically a story about the sort of corrupt colonial involvement of the EC inside of Africa. So when he's mentioning Africa and then mentioning the EC right after that, that is the connection that you're supposed to draw there. That actually, they have this black history with Africa, which is kind of, well, I mean, it's based on reality. There's some things about this series that are pretty far-fetched, such as, like, Australia joining with Japan, to fight the United States, but the idea of Europe being involved in some colonial shenanigans in Africa is really not a stretch of the imagination whatsoever. Head back to our own ocean, yeah, so again, this is a reference to us being outside of our turf. I guess we are probably supposed to be patrolling the Pacific, or deployed to the Pacific, which is why we were doing that previous mission in Kiribati. But now we're in the Indian Ocean, and this is a whole new thing for us. Certainly makes me think about how fast public opinion was shaped and organized to mobilize or to justify the mobilization of U.S. military against ISIS back when that whole debacle got started. Within the space of like 2 weeks, people went from never having heard of ISIS to basically being like, yeah, we gotta go take them out. Probably a similar kind of situation that's going on here, where public opinion is just overwhelmingly behind a military intervention. And I guess the FM writers were kind of just commenting on that kind of situation. So, let's carry on. I said this was going to be a long video, didn't I? Let's go talk to Julius. So you probably remember him. He was one of the junior officers from our home that we talked to. I could go for some, but I just had some today, actually. So, meat and beer, I guess he's supposed to be like red-blooded American. And we can't check out his bio anymore because we fired him from our unit. Can't recruit him again. So yeah, that's just the confirmation that she's up to something. Laura, this is a point in the game in which you can choose what you want to do. If you talk to her 3 times, basically Lynn comes in and kicks her ass, and you get the Walrus Bonser in your inventory, as well as some RP, but you can never recruit this character later in the game. As you can see, she has an S next to her name, and that means she is a special type of pilot, which we will get into later in the game. I think we will not get the Walrus, because the Walrus is a mediocre Vonser, and I don't really care if we get it or not. Instead, we will recruit her later in the game. I think that's what I'm going to go with. But it's up to you. You can decide what you want to do. Okay, that's enough of the crewman's quarters. We've covered the armor section, we have covered the control section, and now we are on to the final section, the officer's quarters. So let's go check that out. So, Feng was kind of checking her out, and she was maybe a little bit appreciative of that, but then she thought about the consequences if Lynn found out. She'd basically be torn limb from limb, had her life destroyed, no doubt. So she's just like, get out of there! Ah! Everybody's terrified of Lynn. So, and then again, of course, it's like, you know, Walter is good at everything, the ladies are all into him, etc., etc. I've talked about that before. But the other point is that she uses, like, Big Sister to refer to herself. Like, I don't remember if it was, like, One-chan or Ne-san, but, you know, in Japanese, in Chinese, in many languages, it's common to use terms like uncle, big sister, little sister, to refer to people's like social position, or to use as a pronoun to refer to them, whereas that's really weird in English. But you know, like the whole point is that by using this like big sister thing, it's like, you know, she's older than him, so it's kind of like a cougar thing that's sort of going on, but it's not really exactly like a cougar. I guess it was kind of like in between a girl that's like the same age as you and a girl that is like a cougar, right? It's like, it's that kind of middle range where they're just slightly older than you, and then there's like that whole implication of her, like, you know, having like sort of a power over you, like taking care of you. All those kind of implications. That's what I guess we kind of have that stereotype fetish in English, but it's a very, very common thing in Japanese. And I was trying to get across the information that that's what she was mentioning, or that's what she was alluding to, and that's why I included that in the translation, even though it is a little bit strange, I have to admit. You have to make these decisions when you're translating. Whether you want to go for accuracy or whether you want to go for a natural translation that sounds very clean and familiar in English. So that guy's he's been bumping up and down in the seat, I guess. Maybe got some sores going on. Alright, I said we were gonna bug this guy some more, and now's our chance. So, this poor guy, Major Grant, not only do we always bust into his office and bother him, he was Skyping with his girlfriend, and then we came along and ruined his conversation, and now he's a lonely man. Oh. Inept captain is inept. Kind of silly. Like, I mean, he wouldn't get to be a captain of a ship like this if he was that stupid. It's humor, you know. So, well, that about does it for this video. we're going to have a whole lot of stuff to cover before we can move on with the plot here. We just switch out all our pilots, so I have to organize all the pilot skills again, because we're basically starting from a blank slate, and have to think about how I want to organize my units, and after I do that, I will start on making the next video, which is going to be our first survival simulator video. And once we're done with that, then we will go ahead and do the next mission. Of course, in the meantime, I will also have to do the new battle simulator, if I can manage that, so that we can get the bonus part that is now available to us. So there's a whole lot to do on Mission 10, and make sure you don't miss out on it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed all the long meandering blathering about the US military and all its different organizational forms. And hopefully you'll stick around for the survival simulator, which is coming up in the next video.